jumping into a project that I finished up a few weeks ago, you can see at the beginning I do these clean film dissolves, and then towards the end I start doing these light wipe exposure ramps that I use adjustment layers for. I'm going to show you how we can put these together to create a good effect. So let's start by looking at this film dissolve here. The reason it's clean and nice is because with the film dissolve you can see the clip that we're leaving. Come look over here. I'm just doing these simple ramps of a Gaussian blur. You can see as I go forward, the girl blurs more and more, and at the last frame, it's at the highest. I have it at about like 75, 80. And then up here, I also rolled the highlights off so that the next clip coming in, the hand holding the compass, shines through a little more without the girl getting in the way. It adds focus for the eyes. It's easy for the eyes to watch. The way that I was able to know I need to do the highlights was because I always start with just the Gaussian blur. I know that when I start and I pull in here, I go right to the beginning of the dissolve and I hit a keyframe of 0 on Gaussian blur, and then I go to the last frame and I choose the amount that I think looks nice. Let's turn off this lumetric color. So without the lumetric color, you can see here it's still kind of bright and a little bit messy to me between the two shots. It's not rendered, so it's not going to look perfect. But when I start playing with these sliders here, I can pull up the contrast, down the contrast. Pretty much what I do is I just mess with the different parameters and see, let's Command Z those, which one helps the first shot get out of the way. And in this case, it was pulling the highlights down, leave space for the next shot to come through. Okay, let's jump forward to the light wipe. So as you can see with these shots, let's go to this one. It's just a cut. The two shots are just being cut like that, nothing fancy, until we get up to the adjustment layer that I put above it. I did an exposure ramp. So I choose my length, and that just depends on the speed of your clips. This is a short or a long clip. These are held relatively long compared to like maybe a short, quick ad or a sizzle reel or something. So the adjustment layer, let's see, 1, 2, 3. It looks like I have about 4 frames on this side and then about 5 to roll off of this side, which is pretty good. So what I did is I go to the cut here, I pull in an adjustment layer for my project, and then I put my playhead there. I put that exposure up to about 3, 4. You can kind of like play with it, see where you want it. It takes some finagling. And then I go back to the beginning and I go down to 0, as you can see here on exposure. And then I go to the end of this one, last clip, and I go down to 0 as well. And then it just gives me that nice white. So if you're doing a faster ad or a sizzle reel or something, you can go all the way up and blow it out. I've seen that before. Because when it's so quick, you don't want too much fade between the two. You just want it to kind of wash out the first shot and bring in the second shot. Because this is kind of a slower paced ad, it's okay that it doesn't fully blow it out because it's just going to look kind of funky. And I also probably wouldn't do this unless it were a creative decision with a faster ad, but I add this light wipe on top, and I also have the opacity rise and then drop again, and that's how I bring that in and out. This light wipe just adds movement. Because this is kind of a relatively, let's jump to this one now, because this is a relatively shorter or longer transition in the world of transitions in an ad, I want a little bit of movement since we're not blowing out the shot with the exposure ramp. We're not blowing out the shot. So your eyes are always going to be seeing a shot. You're never going to see like full white because of this. So with that, I want a little bit of movement. Even if it's not super noticeable, it's subtly working in the background. We can try pulling it off. It helped me get even more brightness. It's kind of hard to tell, but here. It just gives me a little bit more of that misty feeling. It diffuses the shot a little bit more like a diffused light, whereas an exposure ramp is just going to pull up every feature of every shot. So you can see that just kind of mystifies it a little bit, adds some movement, some like subtle subconscious movement. Let's take a look at what my light wipe looks like alone. Let's pull that over, nothing. I'm gonna alt drag that so we can just see it. This is my light wipe. There's more like camera-esque movement to this, whereas just an exposure ramp simply pulls up the colors of everything. So let's Command Z that a couple times. So what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna add a blur to this. Let's just say we wanted that. In this case, I just didn't think we needed it because of my, what I did on purpose with this was, you can see the book is pretty much in the same spot both times. Same with this subject here. This subject here is about in the same spot as this book. I didn't think we needed a dissolve because just these match cuts are just easy to track without needing a dissolve to change your attention. But let's just add a dissolve to show what I would do. So let's build this from the bottom up real quick. Let's delete this adjustment layer. Let's pull in a new one. So I'm going over into my project window here. Let's just create a new one. New item, adjustment layer. Sure. Let's pull this to that length. Cut that down. Let's just pull it to the exact length of the light wipe that I pulled in. Zoom in on the cut. Let's look at this. Let's go to our effects. I have my most used here where I keep extra lumetri color. I'm just gonna pull lumetri color into that, basic correction. Let's go to exposure and type in, I think we had it about 3. Start a keyframe. Let's go to the beginning, type 0. And let's go to the last frame, type 0. So there's our exposure ramp. Let's look. So that gets real bright. So if I wanted to, I could just click back on this keyframe. Let's try 2 instead. Maybe that's better. Let's just go with that for now. So now we've got that. These work a lot better when you have match cuts, because when you see all this light hit you, your eye's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And it wants to look where it was looking next. So if you do this exposure ramp and then something's in the bottom right corner of the frame, that's where the subject is or something, it's just gonna be funky for the viewer. So now what we're gonna try adding is a dissolve that we were talking about on top of that. So let's go to our effects, and under my most used, I keep film dissolve. That's the dissolve I use the most in Premiere. I'm gonna put that right in the middle of my 2 clips. I'm gonna make that film dissolve about as long as our other effects here. I think I could do something like this. You know how it is. You just gotta finagle with these things sometimes. Say we'll pull one shorter. There we go. Let's do that. So now we have a film dissolve. Ooh, that's a little funky looking. Now, I wouldn't normally do this film dissolve here, which is why I didn't, but I'm just showing you so you know how to add the film dissolve with the exposure ramp. So to clean this film dissolve up, let's add our Gaussian blur. I've got one right here. So I'm on this first shot. I'm gonna add that Gaussian blur, boom. I'm gonna hit 0 because I'm at the beginning of the dissolve. Let's go to the end of the dissolve, and I'm just gonna click and drag, and I'm looking at my source monitor or program monitor now, and I'm just going up and down, and I just want to kind of play with it until that feels good, because you definitely don't want to be able to read the letters from the last book. See how those just get in the way? That looks pretty good. If you do too much, it just looks a little crazy. And that can work for some styles, but for me, I just like to hit the threshold of, okay, that's out of the way to me right there. That looks good. And then I'm also gonna pull a lumetri color. Let's say this shot that we're working with, the first shot is already colored, so I'm just going to pull another lumetri color down, go to basic correction, and now I'm just on this last frame still, and I'm just going to pull down contrast. Nope, don't need any of that. That just adds more haze to everything. Let's try highlights. Pull up and down. I don't mind the highlights. I might do that. Let's keep looking. Shadows. Nope, we don't want to pull the shadows down. Whites could be good. I think whites or highlights are going to be our best bet for this. So let's try our highlights. So I'm going to go back to the beginning of where all of our effects start. Make sure I'm clicked on the first shot. I have my lumetri color open. Why don't we name this real quick? Let's right click and rename. Let's name it Luma Ramp, so we know what this is doing. Now we're just going to hit highlights, keyframe. We're going to go to the last shot and pull those highlights down. I mean, we can pretty much pull them all the way down, I think. So now this shot ducks out of the way for the new shot. And that's the idea. Now, let's just take a look at everything, make sure it's doing what we want. Do we like that blur? Yes. Perfect. I'm kind of just eyeballing it, making sure everything's doing what I think it should be doing. Yep, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and render that, and then let's take a look at it. Okay, so now it's playing from the beginning. Let's pull it back to where we were at, and now we have a light ramp and a film dissolve. It's a little bit extra. I don't think we need it here, but it's nice. I don't mind it. Depending on the shot, it could be really useful. It might be better here than it would have been here. Obviously, like with editing, this shot looks like it comes just a little bit before this shot, like in a timeline. So you don't really need a dissolve to show all this. Whereas this is maybe the girl's outside, and then later she's back home reading her book. The dissolve might have been better here to explain the passing of time. So we maybe should have done that. But this is the principle in general. I think that dissolve could have happened quicker. I could do let's try it. I could do shorter dissolve because her moving that book happens for a while. So let's shorten that. Let's just see if that's a good length. So what we're going to do now, we have to redo the effects here. So we're going to go to the front of where the dissolve starts. I'm going to zoom in up in my effect controls window. All right, let's go back to the front of the dissolve. So now our playhead is there. I'm going to pull the beginning of the blur and the beginning of the highlight ramp there. I'm going to render it green again. Okay, now let's take a look. A little better. And obviously you can just finagle with it, but this tutorial is just to show you how to do it. So you can do either of these effects alone. You can just do the exposure ramp, or you can just do the dissolve, but together they can work sometimes. And you can always switch out the light wipe for another asset. There can be, a lens flare that goes with the dissolve, or a grain, or maybe like a glitch or something. You can just start to get creative with it. But these dissolves and then these exposure ramps are really great ways to switch up shots without having to do with something a little more interesting than just a quick cut.